Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Doris Mangrum, your host, and this is Education in Our Community. I'm so fortunate today to have in the studio with me DEVERY Anderson. If that name is not familiar to you, it will be once you know who he is. He is the author of Emmett Till, the murder that shocked the world and propelled the civil rights movement. For those of you who are familiar with this story, just that name alone gives you chills. I happen to have been fortunate or unfortunate, depending on your perspective, to have grown up in the Mississippi Delta about 30 minutes away from where this horrific murder occurred. But Mr. Anderson has done some comprehensive, in-depth research on the book, and I would say it is the premier book of all of the books that have been written. So thank you so much for being with us today. I'm excited to have you, and let's just delve right into our talk. I'd like you to tell our viewers, Mr. Anderson, a bit about your background before we start talking about your amazing book. Tell us about who you are outside of the author of this amazing book.
All right. Well, thank you, Doris. It's a pleasure to be here today. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I am an editor at Signature Books in Salt Lake City, which is a small scholarly publishing house that deals in books related to the West, Mormon history, Utah history, Western Americana, that type of thing. So that's what I do. That's my day job, and I write when I can squeeze it in. So.
Okay. Now, how did you then go from what you just said, editor at Signature Books, to become interested enough in this particular story about Emmett Till to write this amazing book?
Well, the Till case just grabbed me once I learned about it and wouldn't let me go.
Okay.
It's the best way to describe it. It was in the fall of 1994. At the time, I was a student at the University of Utah, just becoming a student there. I just moved to Utah from Longview, Washington. And I learned about the Till case while watching a documentary that I had checked out of the library. 15 minutes of this documentary on the overall civil rights movement was devoted to the Till case as kind of a springboard for the movement. And when I saw that 15-minute segment, what had happened to Emmett Till, his murder, and just all the injustice related to the case, it just wouldn't let me go. And from there, I had to read and find everything I could on the case. And there wasn't much at the time in 1994. There'd been a couple of books written about it, really not much else. And then I tried to learn all I could. I would go into bookstores and go into the section on the civil rights movement or black history or black biography and immediately go to the index to see if anybody ever mentioned Emmett Till. And if they did, I would go to those pages in the book to see if I could learn more. And oftentimes he wasn't mentioned. And I realized that this is a case that was large enough that it should have taken its place in history where it belongs as a major catalyst of the civil rights movement, and it was often ignored, and so that surprised me as well. So I had a number of things that kind of launched me into this. One, learning about it myself. One, discovering that it really hadn't been treated as it should be in history, and I wanted to try to remedy that.
Okay, so now you've found out about the story. You recognize that it doesn't have the coverage that it should have, so what's the next step? What did you do next? In terms of now, I know that there's more that needs to be done. What were the more that needs to be done that you began?
Well, it kind of was slow in moving from discovering the case and beginning my book. That was about a decade apart.
Oh, okay.
And so I spent a decade. I got to know Emmett's mother before she died. She died in 2003, and so in 1996, after I'd known about the case for a couple of years and had been studying it and doing some research, I called her up because I wanted to interview her for a class on racism that I'd been taking. And I was able to get a hold of her and set up an interview with her. And after that first encounter with each other, we really made a connection. And we talked over the phone for the next 6 years until she died. In fact, I talked to her about a month before she died. Never got to meet her in person.
Wow.
But we talked regularly, and she knew me and she knew my children and talked to them over the phone as well. And so that was a great experience getting to know her, because the case suddenly went from a historical event that I was just distant from to something personal. Now I felt like I was part of the story, and over time I came to know others, and Emmett's cousins who were with him in Mississippi, came to know many family members, and so, but in 2004, the federal government reopened the Till case after Emmett's mother had been dead for about a year and a half, and she had always dreamed of reopening the case. She knew it was about ready to happen before she died. In fact, our last conversation, she told me that the case might be reopened. She died, though, didn't get to see that happen, but at the time it was reopened, I discovered that the book that I had always wanted to read on the case hadn't been written. And what I felt that needed was a comprehensive account of the story from beginning to the end. Authors glossed over significant events, I thought, that made the story so compelling. And I wanted to include all of that. And I also wanted to go back and sort through some of the contradictions in the case, because a case where there are eyewitnesses, whether it's the JFK assassination or others, if more than two people witnessed it, you're going to hear more than at least two stories.
Exactly.
And so I wanted to go through and really decipher what had happened, dig deep to try to get at the truth. So as far as what had been told, I wanted to tell it better, and what hadn't been told, I wanted to bring it out and make that part of the story. And since the government was investigating it, I knew there'd be closing chapters where there'd be twists and turns that still hadn't been revealed yet. So the story wasn't finished yet, and there was going to be more to the story that even I didn't know how the book was going to end, really, when I started writing it and when I started researching it.
What would you say in all of this research I'm sure there's probably several, but stands out for you as probably the most surprising thing that you discovered in your research about this story of Emmett Till?
Well, I think I was surprised to learn, well, it shouldn't have really surprised me to see the effect the case had on people, because as you look at the news footage of people attending the funeral, people passed by the casket and several would faint or needed medical attention. But I discovered that this case isn't treated like a historical event for people. When we can read about tragic moments in history, and emotionally we're kind of detached. We can read about tragedy, we can read about murder, but with the Till case, when people discover it for the first time, even today, and I get emails from people that tell me this all the time, that they had just seen a book or had watched a documentary, and when they saw Emmett's face, he was beaten so badly that it was beyond recognition, and his body thrown in the river. People see that picture or those photos of him today, they react just the way they did as though they were walking by that casket. It's not history, it's something personal that hurts them and depresses them. And I've discovered that's how people react about this case. And so the impact, even though there was a long period of time where historians weren't talking about it, people involved with the case weren't talking about it, the impact and the hurt and the pain has been steady all these years. And when people discover it, they're suddenly one with those people who witnessed these traumatic events in 1955. And I've discovered that, and that's been confirmed to me over and over and over in my research as I meet new people, as I inform people about the case, and as people discover it on their own.
Well, I know that's very real, because even my having grown up in the area and having, known some pieces about the story, when I heard the title of your book, it made me relive that I knew all over again. And as I said, the hair raised on my arms, and it just was an eerie feeling all over again. Now, I had the benefit of hearing you do a review of the book recently. And what I'd like for you to share for our viewers is that piece that you were talking about when you had the opportunity to go and see the casket that the body had been removed from, and that experience with looking into the empty casket and how that changed your perspective on things.
Okay, yeah, and a little bit of the background to that.
Please.
Emmett's body, as part of this investigation in 2005, his body was exhumed for an autopsy, and as a standard in these cases, when you rebury the body, you put it in a new casket. And so his original casket was placed in storage because they saw the significance of that. Hundreds of thousands of people had filed past his casket in 1955, saw that battered face, and never forgot that. Emmett's mother had the casket and the body on display for 5 days in September of 1955. When that casket went into storage in 2005, and 2 years later, in 2007, I went to the cemetery to see the grave for the first time, and I asked them to remove the if they would let me see the casket. And they were kind enough to take it out of storage, take the canvas off, open the lid, and leave the room and let me stand there. And suddenly I felt a part of history, because it's this very same casket that I had seen this news footage of over and over for years, of people filing by, looking in and seeing Emmett Till, and just almost not able to contain themselves. And suddenly there I was looking into the same casket. The FBI told me that when they exhumed the casket and exhumed the body and opened the casket, there were thousands of fingerprints on the glass and on the casket lid that was in pristine condition as they were in 1955. Suddenly, you know, as I touched that casket and touched that glass myself, my fingerprints joined those many thousands from decades earlier. And I had a similar experience because the body had been covered with thick glass, I guess for a variety of reasons, so people wouldn't touch the body as it filed by, and because he'd been in the river a few days, there was smell from the decomposition. Of course, he wasn't in there, but I looked into the casket and kind of imagining what it would have been like in 1955 to have seen that body and been horrified. The glass covering, because it had been in the ground for 5 decades, the glass was discolored, and when I looked in the glass, I just saw my own reflection back at me. And it was kind of startling, because it was a moment of it was forcing me to have a moment of self-reflection, to see what it was like to ponder, I guess, what had happened then, but how far I had come. Where was I in all of this? By seeing my own self instead of seeing Emmett Till, I had to ask myself, you know, where do you fit in all this? What are your views? How far are you removed from the Mississippi of 1955, and how far have you come as a person? So it really did force me to ask myself those questions. And I did on the way home from the cemetery. I asked myself, you know, are you not racist because you weren't born in the 40s, where you'd have been a teenager in 55, and I wasn't born in Mississippi? Is that what spared me of being a racist?
Do you think that experience, that this kind of out-of-body experience, if you will, in-body, but out-of-body, if you will, change your perspective on what you were going to go forth with the book? Did it affect you in that way, that the research that you did moving forward changed at all after having that experience, or no?
Well, it really made me realize that that if nothing else before, and various things had built upon this, like my relationship with Emmett's mother, you know, the case had become personal, and that really cemented that fact in my head at that point. Okay. But I realized that I wanted to tell the story in a way that was objective as a historian, yet personal, because this is a very tragic story that's going to affect people at that personal level. And I had to really go full circle with my own emotions with it to be able to go forward then and tell that to others. And I think that's, so it did affect how it went forth from there, because it wasn't just history, it wasn't just something that I was going to look at as a scholar, but I had to bring it to the level where people could relate. I wanted people to feel a variety of emotions too, like I did. I wanted them to read this because they knew the outcome. It was no shock that the men were going to be acquitted. And so it's not like it was a spoiler, you know, alert that I had to put in there. But so I decided, well, they know the outcome. The only way that they can really stay focused on the book is if they felt like they were part of the story. And so one example was when I wrote about the trial. It was only a 5-day trial, and my original plan was to cover the trial in one chapter. But I wanted to provide enough detail, and the investigation had revealed so much. The investigation in 2004 to 2007 found the trial transcript, which had been lost for decades. So I had all the testimony, word for word, that had been given. And so I turned the trial into 2 chapters because I wanted it to be detailed, so that at the end of that trial, I wanted people to feel like they lived through that trial. And even though they knew what the outcome was going to be, if you live it all over again as though you were there, that not guilty verdict is going to anger you in a way that it wouldn't have otherwise. So I had to include the detail, draw people in as part of the trial, because I knew they already knew the verdict. I wanted it to really hit, and I wanted it to hurt.
Wow.
And so, and the thing is about a book like this, you don't have to make up anything.
Exactly.
This story is so compelling on its own that you don't need to fictionalize or manufacture any dialogue.
You have to just figure out how am I going to say this in such a way that it's going to be best received, because people know the story, or they know what they know.
Right.
And you're sharing what they know with what they don't know, and then bringing it and making it alive.
Right.
This happened nearly 62 years ago now, and
Right.
unfortunately, so many of its pieces are still with us today in terms of the things that are happening to black and brown people, stereotyping, profiling. When we look at the incarceration numbers and who they are affecting most and all of these kinds of things. In your lectures, in your book reviews and discussions, do you ever have the opportunity, or is it a part of what you talk about, the Black Lives Matter, the mass incarceration, the impact of unfairness and racism on black and brown people? Does that ever come up in your discussion, or the questions that you may be asked at your discussions and your book reviews?
Oh yeah, it comes up almost every time, I would say. And that's why the Till case resonates so much today. If you've noticed, every time there's a story like this that makes the news, Emmett Till's name comes up.
Yes.
It was Trayvon Martin, his name came up, and comparisons were made right away. In I think almost all of these since, someone else is being compared to Emmett Till, or we're told that so-and-so is the new Emmett Till. We've heard that several times, and I've had people get upset about that. I've had people tell me, there's Emmett Till, it's sacrilege to compare anybody else's these events today to Emmett Till, because Emmett Till was an innocent child, and they'll point out all these, so-and-so had a criminal record, or so-and-so did this, or so-and-so did that. Well, they don't realize that back in 1955, people were trying to turn Emmett Till into a monster as well to justify his murder.
Exactly.
It's just that we've had enough time and perspective now that wherever you are politically, people today tend to agree that the Emmett Till case was a vicious hate crime, but there wasn't. People weren't unified on that back in '55.
No, they were not.
It took a long time, and so I'm seeing the divisions about current cases today. It's the exact steps that people went through. When enough time and perspective goes by on current events, I think we're going to see people probably in agreement one day, and it's hard not to be when you see that in Emmett Till's case, people thought they could get away with murder because he was a black teenager, a black male teenager especially, and that they could kill him and get away with it. Now, and up until that point, Jim Crow was a declaration of the inequality behind the whole Jim Crow system. It was basically saying black lives don't matter. We can make black citizens second-class citizens. We can keep from them the right to vote. We don't have to give them schools that are equal. The whole separate but equal. They got the separate part down pretty good, but the equal part they never did get, nor could they get under that kind of a system. But they were fine with that because these black lives didn't matter so much. And so when you're confronted with that and you're forced to reassess that in your own day, like today, we don't want to, as a people, don't want to believe that we haven't come very far. And so Emmett Till forces us to compare where we were then to where we are now. And when we see in so many ways we haven't moved, that's painful for people to deal with.
It is, absolutely.
But you can't stay in denial about that, and it really forces you to have to say, okay, this is where we are, and this is not good.
Not good. Recently, there in the news, it has come out that the accuser, Ms. Bryant, has changed the story a bit from what was heard that day in the courthouse in Sumner.
Right.
What is your take on the revelation? What do you know about it? What can you tell our viewers about what you've heard or what you may be well aware of in terms of that new information that has come from Ms. Bryant?
Yeah, she did tell another author that parts of her testimony were fabricated, testimony on the witness stand. And it was clear from taking the sources available in 1955, you could clearly see that her story evolved. And so that was no surprise that she said that. What was more surprising is that she talked at all, because other than the FBI, when they came knocking and 2004. She's turned down all requests for interviews. But she did talk to one historian because she'd been writing her own memoir. I don't know what's in there because it's sequestered until 2038, I believe. But she has at least come forth and admitted this, and it's now people are asking, what can we do about that from a legal standpoint? So lying in 1955, the statute of limitations is up on that from what she said on the witness stand. So if she lied to the FBI, if she maintained her original story when she was interviewed by the FBI in 2004, well, that statute of limitations is up as well. So what could happen is, because the case, I guess, isn't officially closed yet. They didn't, when it was opened in 2004, they weren't able to indict anybody who was still living for the case, but they're willing to investigate again if there's reason to. Is, I think, how the FBI put it when they ended the investigation the first time around. So if they had reason to believe that there was something they could prosecute, or if her testimony to the author Timothy Tyson, if they think because of what she told him there, if there's more that she could tell, they could seek to interview her, or maybe summons her memoir that she wrote to see if there may be more information there. But all we know so far is that she fabricated the part of her testimony where she said Emmett grabbed her by the waist and kind of hopped behind the candy counter in the store and grabbed her by the waist. She was specific to Timothy Tyson that said that part is not true. But then she claimed that she couldn't really remember, because it's been so long ago, she can't remember. She said something like, you tell these stories so many times you can't really remember what's true and what isn't. So, but I would think with some prodding, I would think of something that was such a significant part of her life. It was only a moment in time, but it was a significant moment.
Yes.
And I think she could remember more if questioned. And so I'd like to see the memoir be able to get released, at least to officials, for them to look over and see if there's something there. But it was always clear that she fabricated elements of her story, and she knew a jury would clearly, and the defense, I think, was more behind this than her own. I think they were the ones behind it. The defense would never convict a black man for any type of indiscretion with a white woman, as minor as it was. And so they had to play up that fact, even though the jury, it turns out, didn't hear her testimony.
To justify what we ended up seeing these years ago.
Yeah, they would have justified a killing under any circumstances involving a white woman.
As I'm listening to you and all of the, the fascinating twists and turns and all of the new information that you're sharing, like this little piece over here and this piece over here and this happened and this person knew this, and I understand that there is a mini-series that is possibly going to be coming out in the next year or so on your very book. Is that a correct?
Yes.
Okay, so share with the viewers about that and tell us a little bit about what role you're going to play in it, and if you know how long it's going to be, and any information that you can share at this time.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because yes, HBO has picked it up, and the executive producers that there are several, but the ones that you would know would be Jay-Z, Will Smith, Casey Affleck, who, if you saw his Manchester by the he's in
so this is big time
right
then. We're not talking about
and Aaron Kaplan is another one, and the ones I've worked directly with, Rosanna Grace, Alex Foster, and David Clark with Serendipity Film Group, who optioned this originally. And the nice thing about the miniseries is that where a theatrical film, you've got 2 hours. A miniseries like this, it's, I think, scheduled for at least 6 hours.
Wow, nice.
And so they can do a lot with it. There's a lot to tell about this case, and you don't have to gloss over important parts to fit it into a 2-hour theatrical film. So I'm excited that it's going to be a miniseries, and HBO does a great job on
Now, are they
everything
talking back and forth to you about, how to capture things and making sure it's going to be as close to what your research has found as possible? Or are they going to be adding a lot of drama to it to make it more for television? What are your thoughts on what you've seen thus far?
Well, they have hired me as a consultant, so I'll at least get to review things and point out if there's anything inaccurate historically in that. And then if they choose to take liberties after that, at least they'll do it knowingly.
You were there.
Yeah. But with this case, like I said, you don't have to make up
That's
anything.
true.
But maybe Hollywood sometimes feels they do. I don't know. But I know the writer, Steve Capel Jr., his film The Land, which premiered at Sundance a year ago, a lot of great reviews on that, and so he's a very talented writer, and he's working away at the screenplay, and hopefully we'll have something to review soon, and I'll be happy to give him my 2 cents on everything, and then I guess from there it's up to them how they do it.
I
But
can't wait.
I think they'll do a great job.
It's going to be exciting. Well, believe it or not, we're coming to the end of our time. So before we run out completely of time, I'd like you to tell our viewers where they might be able to reach you, but I'd also like you to tell us what's next for DEVERY Anderson. What are you going to be doing next? Are you continuing to research on Emmett Till? Are you writing something new? Are you doing something at the Signature Books? Share with the viewers what your next steps are, as well as how they might be able to contact you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yes, I am working on a new book on Mississippi Freedom Summer of 1964, so which is the other end of the Civil Rights Movement. So I guess my books will be bookends for everything that went in between. And so I'm working away on that, so I get to go to Mississippi to do more research, and I'm excited about that. It feels like a second home to me now.
I was going to say, you're talking about going back down to Mississippi quite frequently.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. I hope to go back in the next couple of months. But people can reach me, they can email me. My email address, DEVERY, DEVERYSA, @gmail.com. If you have questions about either the Till case, the book will be coming out in paperback in the fall, and so I'm going to write a new preface and add a few things in the book to just kind of bring it up to date a little bit, and so that'll be coming out in the fall. And so yes, so Emmett Till will keep me busy for a little while with the miniseries and the book, and I speak about it a lot. It's a case that people want to hear about, and so Emmett's always going to be with me, just no matter what else I decide to write. So.
And the amazing thing is, there's still, believe it or not, here 62 years, nearly 62 years later, people who have never heard.
Right.
And who would think that? I mean, for some of our young people, perhaps, but older people as well. So, you know, we're thrilled to have had you here and to have heard about what you've done to bring the story even more to life than what we thought we knew. And like I said, having grown up in the area, I thought I knew the story, but I'm finding out so much more. So thanks again for being with us today and sharing your insight and your deep research on this project. We applaud you. We thank you for your work. Is there anything that you'd like to say in these last few moments to our viewers, one passing or closing thought that you'd like to leave with them today?
Well, just the whole process was such an incredible journey for me. I came to know some people that were always heroes to me, like Merle Evers, I think, is one who I got to interview and who I've met several times since. Julian Bond, who wrote the foreword to the book.
Yes.
It was the last piece of writing he did prior to his untimely death in 2015. The book came out just days before he died, and his wife told me that was the last thing he ever wrote. And he was the one who narrated Eyes on the Prize, where I first learned of Emmett Till. So he's the one who told me about Emmett Till, and then in the end, we kind of went full circle, he then did his part to help me, and I taught him things about the Till case over the years as well. And so I could never replicate the journey, no matter what else I write.
Wow.
So.
Well, thank you again so much. Viewers, you've had a great opportunity today to listen to the voice of a man who has spent 2 decades putting together the story behind the story of Emmett Till. Wherever you see his name, or if you'd like him to come into your area, you won't be disappointed. I thank you so much, Mr. Anderson, for being with me today, and as always, go out and make this a great day. Do something good for someone else.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.